Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Atlanta Autism Consortium's presentation tonight. I am Tyler Whitney, and I will be the host for this evening. This evening, our topic of discussion will be autism spectrum disorders and the use of the internet by adolescents and young adults. As I am getting ready and set up now, I am looking forward to the opportunity to give this presentation. But first, let me thank you all for joining us tonight on this program. I am the co-director or co-chair of the Atlanta Autism Consortium, along with Nadina Root. If this is your first time joining one of our programs, welcome. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating collaborative collections throughout the Metro Atlanta autism community. We host free programs and events every month, some in person, some online, and aim to serve the spectrum at large, including parents, family members, adults with autism, researchers, clinicians, and educators. Tonight's program will be recorded, and a copy of this will be sent to the email address you provided once it is live and on our YouTube channel. You will also receive a copy of my email address if you have questions. So without further ado, let's get started. I am a clinical psychologist and have been in practice for roughly 20 years. I've been in Atlanta for roughly, let's say, just over 10 years. And my experience here has been one of lots of events that are very, very pleasurable, and also other things that have allowed me to explore autism spectrum disorders and to also be able to, let's see, I want to make sure I get everything started and correct. So let me make sure that I'm doing this right. Oh boy. Okay, there we go. That's what I'm looking for here. So as I do this, let me just tell you that we'll be able to do some questions and answers at the end, but feel free, if you are viewing this, to write your answers in the notes section or the chat section, and we can go from there. The reason that I get to do 2 months in a row of this is that, you know, this is something that I'm very passionate about and something that I'm really, really concerned about. And if you ask my kids, I have 3 teenagers at home, 16-year-old twins and a 14-year-old son. And they are constantly asking me why it's so concerning to me how much time they spend on electronics. But I think, you know, after we do the numbers tonight and we talk a little bit about the presentation and why I believe that this topic is important, I think that everyone will, you know, I think come to the conclusion that there's an awful lot of world out there. And in that world, that we'll be able to establish some things that will help us to create, if nothing else, you know, certainly topics for conversation. So tonight, just to go over what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about autism spectrum disorders and the internet. And I want to start that with, you know, some alarming statistics that have come out from the CDC, you know, talking about the number of individuals, particularly teenage girls, that are experiencing prolonged periods of sadness, depression. You know, it's estimated right now in our country, the numbers that the CDC has put out, that about 60% of teenage girls feel these types of feelings. And it's devastating because I think, you know, when you talk about the types of things that they're experiencing that would cause this, you know, it's saying that, you know, sexual assault, 1 in 3 girls before the age of 18 will be sexually assaulted, you know, and the consideration of suicide and not wanting to be here anymore and those kind of things over the past decade 15% have been forced to have sex. 6 in 10 girls persistently sad, 60% like we talked about. So we're having to deal with a generation of young women that are, having extraordinary levels of sadness and those types of things. So I want to start out with talking about that and then talking about the numbers of individuals on the autism spectrum. And I guess we can focus on women and girls as well, because, we know that the suicide rates and the rates of depression are much higher in the autism spectrum disorder than they are in the neurotypical population. So one of the things that I like to think about when I think about the new things that we're learning about autism, later age of diagnosis for some adults, women and girls diagnosed at a much higher number, and those types of things. These risk factors and the fact that the internet has been a strong contributor to the amount of time that people are spending in their lives, it is really concerning. I mean, it just is so concerning that a lot of people are, having to get into the idea or the mindset that we have to monitor the amount of time that we're spending online, and that we have to look at the types of things that these effects are having. So when you think about autism spectrum disorders from a general sense, and you think about the idea that, there are benefits, you have the amount of control, certainly, that comes from speaking over the internet versus having to come up with responses more quickly in a face-to-face conversation. There's no doubt that that is appealing to people that are trying to be understood and trying to communicate with one another. But the other thing that I think is maybe mythical in a sense, but more so the idea that there is a separation between the people that you are talking to and yourself. And one of the things that we'll find as we go into this topic is that when you're looking at how people communicate and engage with one another, one of the things that comes to mind is that there's verbal and nonverbal messages, and that the verbal messages that you receive via electronics may not be as notable or may not be as predominantly visible as they are when you're face-to-face or in person. Now, for the disadvantages, obviously, everybody or most people that are on the internet are looking for some form of connection. And that doesn't have to be just on social media. That can be, on things that can give you information, that can be on learning sites, that can be on video games. Certainly, the internet is a great source of information. But the other thing that you think about is that the amount of time and effort that you put into relating to another person on the internet versus the amount of time and energy that it takes to be in person with another person, is the payoff is just much quicker online and much less anxiety provoking, because you're not looking directly at a person. You're able to recover and respond more quickly. And you're able to, in essence, I don't want to say hide from another individual, but you're certainly more able to maneuver when you're online, okay? So when we're going to the next piece here, I want to talk a little bit about Singapore. And the interesting part about Singapore is that it is a highly electric or highly electronic community. All right. We've talked about Asia and the fact that Asia has a lot of problems with their internet. So much so, in fact, that the government has, limited the amount of time that people are supposed to spend online every day. The government has federally funded or nationally funded programs for people that are addicted to online interaction. And as you can see here, that when we're talking about Singapore as a community, that you have children in that community accessing the internet 4 to 7 days a week, and doing so and using the internet at much younger ages, from 6 years, 1 month old. And this data is roughly approaching 10 years old. So we're talking about other countries dealing with similar types of things that we're dealing with in the United States. And I can tell you, COVID didn't do us any favors, because what it did is it gave us a fear that caused us to retreat into our homes. And then it says, okay, now what are you going to do? And for a lot of individuals, that just meant more screen time, more online time. So when we look at the United States, one of the things that we want to do is we want to look at, more recent numbers. And fortunately for this presentation, I was able to find research numbers from the Pew Research Center, which is a top research center, from 2022, which was just a year ago. And I'm not sure we're at the level that Singapore is, but we are not far behind. So when we look at the statistics that we're looking at, we want to discuss how we garnered these statistics, first of all. So these were the things or the variables that they looked at, and they brought the numbers out in 2022, but the population survey was actually done in 2021. And one of the things that I want to point out is when you get into these large community-based studies, I mean, we're talking about numbers, in the tens of thousands, say 50,000 to 5 million. You're talking about a lot of data. So a little bit or a minor shift in that data can mean a substantial change in the lifestyle variable that you're talking about and those types of things. So again, we're looking at age and gender, race and ethnicity, census population, metropolitan status, education only for the parents, household income related to race and ethnicity, and total household size. All right. So when they broke it down, this is what they did with the sample. They put them into these groups, okay? And they looked at the types of things and the amount of weight that they were giving each of these things. As you can see, very, very interested in the prime teen group, 13 to 17, boys and girls, breaking it down, 13, 14, 15 to 17, household income less than 30,000, up to the middle income and higher middle incomes here at the research center, okay? So one of the things that was really interesting to me, and when you look at it and you say, how much is a lot? They use the descriptive adjective of almost constantly. And when I think of almost constantly, I think of the idea that you are pretty much checking whatever it is you're checking on, whether it be a recipe in the oven or one of your children or those kind of things, almost all the time. And when you look at it and you look at what was going on, say, 8 years ago or so, and then you look at it and you look at what's going on in this 2021 study, the numbers are extremely high, and when you think about how people would report this, you would think about, would this be something that there would be any guilt and shame about? And certainly since it's self-report, I wonder as a researcher, is this an underreported number as opposed to a number that, people are not going to have any problem being honest with? And to tell you the truth, I actually get my my time on the internet every week when I'm at church on Sunday, and tells me whether I'm doing better, tells me whether I'm doing worse. I just think that it's kind of ironic that I get it while I'm at church. So when we look at what types of devices the individuals are using, when you look at the use of the phones, I mean, I think that is just unbelievable in the numbers that we're talking about. I think we're talking about the idea that roughly 10 years ago, we as parents and adults in the national survey would have thought about the idea that it was probably okay or an acceptable practice to give teenagers or 12, 13-year-olds cell phones so that we could see where they were, so that we could know that they were safe, and certainly so that they could have access to anything that we felt would be informational. Now, the end of the title for this presentation was Pandora's Box. And as you remember, Pandora was a mythical character, and they put all of the things that were bad in Pandora's world in a box, and at one point it got opened, and all of those things that were bad came rushing out. I don't know that we're at that level, but I think we're at an alarming level at the amount of toxic things that are coming off the internet. And we'll get to that a little later. So I really don't want to beat that into the ground at this point, okay? But if you look at how things are falling out in terms of the numbers that we've seen, there are just some really, really high numbers. All right, so when you look at this particular statistic, what I'm talking about here are some of the more common or the more recognized social media platforms. Okay, so you have YouTube, you have TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, and those are some of the more recognized ones. You have others that are more hidden, that require access codes and those kind of things. And those have their own positive things and their own negative things. Obviously, if you want to protect data, you want to make sure that whoever's looking at it has been given the code and is approaching it from that standpoint. But I just don't think that when we look at these numbers in terms of how things are happening in this day and age, that we can look at the increase, obviously, from 2014, 2015 to 2022, and not be somewhat surprised at how quickly those numbers have jumped, especially the top three, right? Or top four: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. And the funny part is you see the reverse on Facebook, Twitter, those types of things. So, we can look at that and kind of see we're going from what to what, that kind of stuff. Now, the thing that I found interesting about this part, and there's another slide that shows this in a little bit more of a bar graph form, because I know that this is a little bit, more difficult to follow. But one of the things that I think that you have to recognize when you look at this is that when TikTok appeared on the scene, there was an immediate shift. All right. And what does TikTok offer that Facebook doesn't? Well, I don't know that there's one answer to that, but one thing that I can say about the TikTok stuff is you start to get into people that are performing, people that are trying to send a message. With Facebook, a lot of times you were seeing use, as people got used to the internet, that was, what can I say, either more personalized or more related to topics of personal interest, those kind of things. When you get to TikTok, there's a lot of showing off going on. And that showing off is not only profound in terms of, what it says about the person, but you have to ask yourself, if other people are this good at doing things, what does that say about me? Or what does that say about my life? Or what does that say about my abilities? Those kind of things. And that's something that I think the research is looking at and showing very clearly. All right. So then we take a look here, and you see that the teen girls are more likely than boys. And a lot of people would say, well, the boys are, playing video games, or the boys are consumed in other aspects of the internet. And that might be true. That simply might be true. But I do have to tell you that there's an article today in the paper that talks about an opinion of a therapist that is somewhat normalizing scrolling behavior. And by scrolling behavior, what I'm talking about is this idea that you can get onto a site and you can simply just go through the information that's there looking for things of interest. And then once you find something that's of interest to you, you look more closely at it. You click on it, and all of a sudden, the site that you're on starts feeding you a steady diet of whatever it is that you're prone to look at. And before you know it, 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours have passed. And that type of stuff can cause even the most conscientious of persons to lose track of time. I find it interesting here when you look at the racial comparisons, right? So what is it about African-American teens or Black teens that are more drawn to TikTok compared to white or Hispanic teens? And why are teen girls, if you're talking about gender, more likely than boys to use TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat? Teen boys more likely to use Twitch, Reddit, and YouTube. Well, I can tell you the Twitch and the YouTube part because I see it an awful lot in my practice. The Twitch and the YouTube part have prolific abilities to show them better ways to play video games, kind of playthroughs, as they call them. The Reddit piece, it's informational, but it has somewhat of a TikTok quality to it as well. So now we're looking at socioeconomic status, and we're looking at households split up by income. And again, the income brackets that they're using are here at the bottom of the page. So you look at, less than 30,000, 30 to 74,999, and 75,000 plus. And it's baffling to look how full the smartphone side of it is, right? And then as you come over to the desktop, laptop, computer, and the gaming consoles, for the majority of the male teens, what I've seen in my practice, and one of the things that, is personally interesting to me, is the idea that the male teens that I see when they're younger, they'll use handhelds, gaming consoles, and sometimes computers and iPads and those kind of things. But by the time that they are firmly established in their teen years, a lot of them have left that stuff behind and moved either exclusively to their smartphone or to a desktop or laptop computer that is, a very high power computer, great graphics cards, fast processors, all those types of things. And so that graduation from those types of things are pretty much shown in the numbers here. When I think about and I look at, the term that they use almost constantly, I think about, flashbacks to my own childhood. And, a lot of times if my parents were less happy with me, they would say things like, "You're always doing this," or "You never do this." There were extreme types of adjectives used, to describe my behavior. When you say almost constantly here, and you look at the numbers that you're seeing in this particular type of a statistic, one of the things that pops out to me is the idea that when you're talking about a metro area, or when you're talking about large cities, I think you're talking about, faster cell phone speeds. I think you're talking about more ability to be by cell phone towers, more ability to be by satellites, those kind of things. So those types of numbers aren't necessarily as, surprising to me. But I think when you look at, again, the types of numbers that you're looking at with half of the population for teens moving into young adults being very, very distracted, I guess is the word that I'm going to use, by certain types of electronics and the way that they're using the electronics, that does not bode well for development, because what it basically says is self-learning, or what I'm interested in, the topics that I'm interested in and that I'm going to pursue, are more interesting to me than anything or anyone in my environment. And what that means is everything else is prioritized in a different fashion. And there's a lot of truth to be said in that the way that we prioritize things can become very habitual. And if this electronic trend that we're seeing is habitual, then before we know it, a lot of the individuals, for instance, last year, we know that research has come out and it's told us that for standardized college entrance exams, particularly the ACT, last year was the first year that reported a mean score or a middle score below 20. And that's, quite surprising, considering that we are equipping our students with things that are supposed to be giving them access to almost unlimited information. And then you have to say to yourself, well, if we're giving them this and they're using it, but we didn't really give them the appropriate instructions on how to use it, it's probably not that surprising that we're finding that they're using it to do different things. Okay. So almost 20% or 20% are visiting YouTube constantly, and if you look at the other numbers that are there and the circles and the smaller to larger circles, I'm not sure that these circles were best positioned to show us what's going on, because I would argue that I think there's probably a lot of crossover in the use of YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, because I don't know many adolescents, many young adults that aren't far more proficient than I am. In fact, I'm going to tell a little story on myself right now. So the other day, I was sending out a message to my family. We have a group message where everybody's on it. And I noticed that the initials, CJ, for my son, I was never really getting any responses to him. So I click on it and I find that this is definitely CJ that I'm sending the message to, but it's not my CJ, because he only has, he has a certain email that's in the family messaging. And so, my teenage daughters just thought it was hilarious that I was sending these family-based messages to a different CJ. I didn't think it was that funny. And then I came to embarrass myself even more by finding out the family that I was sending it to wasn't even necessarily my family. Now, the name that the family had been named was very close to the one that we used, but on the internet, just like any other types of things that are very specific, close isn't good enough. And that was, I guess kind of a simple mistake on my part, but to my kids, it was really fascinating that I could make that simple of a mistake. So So when I look at this particular part of the data, you see the shift away from the more personalized, show yourself, tell us about yourself, take a long time reading and look at those types of internet usage, and shifting more towards the types of things that are more gratifying more quickly, that give you instant gratification, that will show you things that you want to see and weed out all the rest of the stuff. As you can see here, YouTube is a constant. TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram split the difference. But Facebook, for those I think probably that are out of the educational system, is all but done, it looks like, in this study, which is, I guess, not surprising if you're a techie person, but if you're a person like me, that was when I picked up, the idea of social media. And so that's all I really knew. And a while ago, my wife asked me, how come I, look at Facebook? And so I got off, and I just have never gotten back on. It's not necessarily because I don't value the information that's there. I don't have time for it. So how much time is too much time when you're a teenager? That's an interesting question, because I think, obviously this is skewed way to the left with, too little time getting, the majority of it being said, no, I never spend too little time. And a good bit of people, well over a third of people, saying that, I spend way too much time. So I think we're shifting, to the side of too much or high end of average way too quickly here. And, there are a lot of reasons for this, and we'll get to those reasons as we continue to move along. So a lot of people, and I don't know if you've ever done this or if you've dealt with teenagers recently, but a lot of people feel like teenagers are way too involved with their cell phones. And I'm not sure what that means, but I do know that the guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the guidelines from the CDC, they talk about very direct boundaries, very direct time limits on the amount of time that teenagers are being allowed to spend online. And the most of that time is being spent on the cell phone. So if we look at that and we say, okay, if we reversed it and said, well, let's just stop using it altogether, you get the reverse effect with, roughly 20% of these kids saying, no way, I couldn't do it. Another 35% saying, this would be very difficult, but if I needed to do it and I was on board with you, I would give it my best effort. 26% saying, no problem, do it very easily. And another 20% saying, oh, this would be super easy. I don't know what we would do now. I took a picture several years back when I was at a convention of a payphone, and I sent it, to my family and said, do you guys know what this is? I was at a large hotel that had convention center flooring, and so still had some of the old payphones in, and everyone just kind of hemmed and hawed. And, they of course could say it looked like a phone, but they didn't know why it would be attached to a wall, and, why it would be so oblong and so big, and all of those different kinds of things. I think cell phones have become, one of those things that have personal identifiers in them. So I'm not sure that those of us that are concerned about safety are saying to anybody that we know that have a cell phone, hey, go ahead and borrow my cell phone to make a call, because a lot of people that are scam artists and are trying to run a con these days will ask you to use your phone to make a call, and then, try to derive some of the personal information from that. And I think that says a lot about, just how dependent and how important these cellular devices are to us, Yeah, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I think when you look at this and you talk about the idea of teenagers and people in the young adult range, the more you use something, the more accustomed you become to using something, obviously the more difficult it's going to be to let go of what that is that you're using. I think that this slide definitely reflects that and is again skewed toward the left, where the majority of folks are saying, look, we've had this for a while now, we're used to it, we need to have it, it helps our lifestyle, it enhances our lifestyle. But I think this conversation, the one that we're having tonight, is a really important conversation, because I don't know about you guys, but the numbers really, really reflect the shift in our thinking about what we initially thought was a good thing. And when we're looking at the numbers, I think a lot of us are scratching our heads or are thinking very hard about what comes with that good thing that we said a decade or so ago that we were going to give kids. Some people, just like people that that have become addicted to substances, once they start, they are immediately just captivated by things, and that has a lot to do with your genetic background. It has a lot to do with the way that you were raised, all of those kind of things. As you can see, we've got our favorite guy from Seinfeld here, Mr. Kramer, who reacts very extremely to almost anything that comes into his environment. And I use that because one of the things that needs to happen, or I hope happens from this conversation, is the idea that, what are we doing that's good with our electronics, and what are we doing that just is simply causing us to hurt ourselves in the long run. And when you think about people that are extreme in the way that you react, you think about addiction. When you think about things and people that underreact, you're also thinking about, skills that aren't built, skills that need to be built, and those kind of things. And Cosmo Kramer is one of those guys. So let's define what we're talking about here. I think it's a good idea for us to think about, putting definitions with the numbers that we've just seen. What is something that is considered excessive use? And, I think most people would say that when you have problematic experiences, when I'm talking about problematic experiences, I'm talking about it is used to the point where you decide you don't want to exercise anymore. It's used to the point where you are deciding to skip things that are good for you, meals, sleep, hydration, you name it. There's a gamut of things that are problematic physically about this, all right? Negatively affect you when you are affecting the relationships that you have with other people, when you are affecting the work that you do. Like I said, I was telling you, in Asia, particularly in China, they're putting strict limitations on the amount of internet use during the day, because people started not showing up for work because they were spending so much time on the internet, and it was causing them either to be ill or, for whatever reason, unprepared to work. So then my question is, what's excessive use for a teen and young adults? And I thought that this YouTube video, portrayed it pretty well. So I'll click on it and see if we can't watch it.
Hey, Sarah.
Oh my gosh, he's so cute. How do you know him?
Oh, I'm gonna do it like I taught you. Love the new tattoo, Sarah. Let's go!
Dude, that's Sarah. The girl in the pink shirt. That's the girl I was telling you about. Oh, that's Sarah?
Theater 2 on your left. Hey, Sarah. What color underwear today?
Hey, Sarah. So when you want to post something new?
Anything you post online, anyone can see. Family, friends,
See you later, Sarah.
even not so friendly people. Think before you post.
I don't know about you guys, but that's a little creepy for me, not only as a person, but also as the father of teenagers. I didn't like the way a lot of those guys, we're talking to Sarah, and certainly they had information about her that is personal information and probably, stuff that would make her regret that kind of stuff. So I thought that was pretty well done. Oh, let's see. Yeah, there we go. So this is what we can do to identify really quickly those problem areas for anybody that we're having this conversation with. So you talk about something that you really, really enjoy, you really, really like. The more you like it, the more you do it, you need more of it to get the same kind of an effect. And so that's one of the signs. You talk about when it's taken away from you, that it affects your attitude in a negative way. I've, seen a lot of kids, and certainly I think adults as well, who, they miss information that they're used to having, and they become, nervous, concerned, irritable, even violent. Academic performance goes down because you spend more time doing what you like than maybe what you should be, and health, we talked about that, if you're not spending time moving your body, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not eating, well, all of those things, tries to go online less, but, keeps drawing back in, just promising themselves one more time, just a little bit more. I just need a little bit more. Preferring the internet, to things they used to do. No, I don't want to go to the store with you anymore, Dad. No, I don't want to go get dinner. Can you just bring me some home? And then it's almost Pavlovian, the way that they're trained, to hear when there's a vibration, hear when, or see when something lights up, any of those types of things, and certainly become alarmed if they misplace it, set it down somewhere. I find it interesting. I learn about all the new things that my phone can do because my family shows me. Find it interesting that you can find your iPhone by sending an alert from another phone. That just tells you, it's almost like a caller. All right. So when you think about it, you can really sum it up by saying, the feelings of lonely. Whoa. Let's go back. So let's see if we go. Oh, there we go. You find that these feelings increase the longer that you do these types of things, and you're looking for more and more good feelings. So it's almost like physical addiction, substance addiction, in the sense that you're chasing something that used to feel good that no longer feels as good maybe as it used to. You have people that are upset with you because maybe you're not living up to the expectations, or you're behaving differently than you used to behave. The behaviors and the impulse control becomes more and more inconsistent. And then you see, the depression sets in. When you replace something that authentically makes you happy with something that is a variant or doesn't have the ability to make you authentically happy, that's when depression creeps in. Okay. Sleep deprivation disturbance, obesity, cardiovascular risk. As I get older, one of the things that I've noticed is it's not as easy to sleep well. One of the things I've also noticed is if I don't move my body tends not to want to move even more than it did before. So I need to move my body just so that my body will keep moving. Carpal tunnel, never had that, but I can tell you that, anytime that you do something to an excess, body parts wear out, just like other parts. Personal health and hygiene. Oh, I don't need to take a shower. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, it's been 3-4 days. But yeah, you don't want to do that. That's just not socially acceptable unless you don't leave the house. And that's, again, another negative socially. Exposure to other risks. I'm going to show you some stuff in the day that I found last night as I was preparing for this, just headlines off of Apple News that just, it blows my mind that we're having all of these things happen to us, whether it be bullying, whether it be unknown people soliciting us, whether it be, things that we shouldn't be looking at that aren't good for us, those kind of things, people trying to grab information. It's happening to those that are less savvy. So, older generation, maybe people that weren't born with electronics, they have to be taught through, hopefully not negative experiences, but taught what is and isn't acceptable. And, that's just part of what we're doing. So cognitive skills, this stuff about attentional problems has been around for a good part of my career. It was around a little bit before I started to train in the 90s, but it's gotten much, much worse because we're now trying to do more things, process more information, pay attention to more stuff than we were before. And it erodes our capacity much quicker. I had a young lady in my office today during a session say that she was like a computer with too many applications open. She wasn't able to really get any of the functional things that she wanted to work because there was too much going on in her mind. And that's the informational problems processing that we're talking about here. The online activities are seen as more important or priority to other activities. Well, that's baffling to my generation and generations that didn't grow up with this stuff. I have to kind of date myself here because I think it'll give you guys some perspective. The first time that I ever used PowerPoint in an academic pursuit was to defend my dissertation. So that was at the end of graduate school, which, was late 90s, early 2000s. And boy, you talk about the kind of jump that the kids today have. You saw the stat from Singapore where kids that were just over 6 were starting to really get comfortable using the internet, And then you talk about the payoffs on the internet, okay? Everybody's pretty, everybody's thin, everybody eats food that's way more delicious. I had another patient come in today and he said, Dr. Whitney, you want to hear a funny joke? And I said, of course, I always like jokes. And he said, do you remember when you used to take a picture of your food and then go down to the store, get the film developed, and then go around to your friends and show them that picture so they could see how delicious your food was? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, exactly. That never happened, but we do it all the time now with food on the internet. And I was like, you got me there. That's a good one. I agree with you. All right. So how do you help your child see that, this is happening, that this is going on? You didn't cause it. You're not the bad guy. Well, first of all, you have to have a conversation, which, facts be said, means you have to put down the electronics because you have to have a conversation, right? And then, you have to set some boundaries. You have to say, okay, these are the times we're going to use, electronics. These are the times we aren't. And the best plans that I've seen, the family plans, like American Academy of Pediatrics points out, are the family plans that are applicable to the whole group. Now, obviously, there are times when adults need to, and obviously even children need to access their electronics during times that are supposed to be no use of electronics. But I would argue that the more stringent you are with the rules, the more balance you'll have in your life. Tech-free time. How many times do you hear kids say, and it was said back in my day before there were electronics, I'm bored. My mother used to tell me, if you're bored, you're a boring person. So go figure out how to not be bored. And, a lot of kids these days, they have a hard time because with the internet, they have unlimited access to anywhere in the world, any information they want. And that just seems easier. All right. And then obviously setting a good example is the best way to teach. Okay. So, these are just definitions of, what people are talking about in mental health, and I think a lot of it is pretty common sense. So, physical activity, how much sleep you should have, tech-free times. Obviously, you're going to ruin your phone if you get food all over it. So it's not a good idea to have it around food or drink, that kind of thing, right? Bedrooms, that is to me where a lot of the violations take place, because I mean, yes, these are private places. Yes, you want to respect each other's boundaries when you live in a family. However, because that has been taken to an extreme, you have a lot of the younger generation that says, this is my space. You cannot enter, you cannot access my space without my permission. This is not the United Nations. A family is something that is made up of leadership. Some would say dictators, but I'm just going to say leadership. And they have access to the entirety of the environment, and we have to think about that as parents, okay? So this is the pitch for safety, and I think it's a good pitch. So I will go through this because I really want to have time for discussion at the end. I really want to get some thoughts from people that have been kind enough to give me their attention for tonight. So you need to keep your stuff safe. You need to keep yourself safe, and you need to use proper behavior online. I have been baffled and shocked by the level of difference or the contrast in the type of speech and language and verbiage and pictures and memes and GIFs that I see people accepting, sending, doing those kind of things, because it really does talk to the type of devolvement or the type of debasement that we're seeing in our community, we're seeing in our country. If you allow certain types of thoughts, behaviors, speech, and everybody argues on both sides, so I'm not going to get on my soapbox for this, but you should be the same whether you're in person or whether you're online. And if there's a vast difference, you should have the conversation with your child. Why? Okay. Personal information. I'll go through this very quickly. You guys probably know a lot of these things, so we'll do this. Okay. And then ask yourself, if you are problem solving about a person or an individual or a contact, ask yourself why they're asking for the information, what they're asking for, and why would they need it? How would they use it? Okay. I'm a huge Looney Tunes fan, so this is my buddy thing, chasing after Bugs Bunny. And I want him to represent the internet at this point, because in doing these types of presentations, I'm not trying to do what they used to do to us in driver's ed, which is show us really, really horrific, scary accidents and, all the terrible things that can happen. But I'm trying to say, what we once thought was just a pretty box with a bow on it, wrapped with all the answers to all the mysteries in life inside, has a lot of dangers too. So, know what the information is, how critical it is, those types of things. Be very, very mindful of the types that you're doing in order to protect your personal information on your electronics. Okay. I talk to teenagers and young adults all day long, and I can tell them that, a good rule of thumb is if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Following the old 14th century monk Occam, the Occam's razor, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Think about the things that you would say in person. Think about the things that you would say online. Make them match who you are as a person. Go to websites, that you wouldn't be embarrassed if other people were there with you. Phone calls, it's easier to be brave if you're not face to face to someone, but be kind, be nice, use the types of language and the types of things that you want to be remembered for when you're talking and communicating people, regardless of whether it's face-to-face or online. Okay. Don't be spooked or, curious about things that are, mysterious. That's another way to, bait people. Your bank is going to contact you directly. They're not going to, just send out something for you to open and see. If stuff has attachments on it, probably not a good idea to open it if you don't know where it's coming from, all this type of stuff. Okay. So this is really interesting. These are two very easy ways to keep your Mac and your PC safe. I didn't know this stuff. That's why I put this stuff in. Okay. So when you're thinking of the types of things that are fun, are good, there's good information, right? Go to the effort to create the path yourself each time. Don't get caught into the places where people can attach on to you and go with you that you don't know. Okay. Remember that your behavior, both in person and online, is attributed to you, and that you are the person that would be considered your own biggest threat. All right. So these types of things, when be mindful of who you're sharing with, be mindful that a hashtag is promoting a certain type of a theme or a certain type of a message, all those types of things, right? Okay. I'm trying to hurry through these because I really do want to spend a little bit of time at the end talking about this stuff and doing these kinds of things. Okay, so we'll try to wrap up pretty quickly here. All right. So if you don't know a person, if you're not familiar with them, even if they know people do your due diligence to find out who they are. Do your due diligence to find out, why their message is coming personally to you. Like I said, you should try to have the same friends online or the same people that you know online in the real world. You should have some other context of knowing them only online. Don't put the same amount of weight on relationships. I can tell you that individuals on the autism spectrum, sometimes they get really lonely and they really want relationships, and they fall for relationship types of traps or relationship types of baits that end up in extortion, that end up in them being vulnerable and victimized. And that's heartbreaking to me. Okay. All right. So I think I need to go back on that one. So let's do that. So this is what we teach younger children, and hopefully the younger generation, by the time they're 11, 12, going into, they know this. They know that there's another human being on the other side of their internet connection, right? They know that it's not okay to do unkind things to people online just because they're not there. It's not okay to do it to them in person. But certainly, if you wouldn't do it to them in person, you don't want to have any part of that kind of stuff online. Okay. So all of this kind of stuff, and this is pretty typical for the types of offenses that you see, and I will show you in some of the news articles that we're going to look at that I just pulled really quickly, those types of stories, those types of things. But all of these things are incredibly hurtful to human beings and really don't have a lot of places in our society. It takes plenty to sift through the information we already have without us contributing maybe things that we've heard third party or that we've heard from other people. Don't be a part of this kind of stuff. It just isn't healthy. Okay, so let's talk about social media. This part was very informational for me. Social or audio platforms, Clubhouse, Twitter, the Spaces and Spotify, those kind of things. These are audio platforms, right? So video social platforms, YouTube, TikTok stories, Reels, Instagram, Facebook Watch. that's, to me, pretty self-explanatory. This stuff was newer. The disappearing content stuff, Snapchat, Instagram stories, Facebook stories, LinkedIn stories. To me, this kind of stuff, and they now have a platform which is a little bit intriguing to me, called In the Moment or Right Now. And basically, it's for you to share a piece of your life on a regular basis, maybe daily. And it gives you a time limit before you post it. So, it wants you to be really authentic with what you're doing and not filter it and those kind of things, which is a nice idea, but we shouldn't have to do that. So, the shoppable social media platforms, that kind of thing, the Facebook shops, Instagram shops, TikTok, that kind of stuff that sells stuff, anymore. This is the way a lot of people choose, to get goods and services, which, to me is great. The social media live streams where you're watching people do things, Twitch, particularly for video games, YouTube, man, you can find out how to put stuff together. You can find out how to make stuff. I mean, great stuff comes from this. LinkedIn and Twitter, I don't use Twitter much. Every so often I'm on LinkedIn because I try to check out people that I'm working with or that I'm going to meet or that kind of thing. And then, of course, the closed private community social media, Discord, Slack, Facebook groups. Okay, again, those of us that are older, this is kind of tough stuff. But if you think about it, we should learn it, because the people that we live with, the younger generations, those kind of things, this is the way they're going to choose to contact us. This is the way they're going to choose to stay with us and do things like that. So, want to do that. So we're coming to the end here of, the presentation piece. I think, for me, this is the place where we can find those types of things. These resources that I've listed are resources that I've vetted myself, and I know that they're good. I know that there are many, many more, and there are many more people that are much more capable than I am, for finding these types of things and doing these types of things. But I will tell you, it is in your best interest. It is in the interest of your children's development to do these kinds of things and to be interactive in these kinds of ways in their lives, because the world that we grow up in now, the world that we see these days, is simply not the same world that the majority of us that are raising children grew up in. I wish it was, but it's not. And so it is imperative that we keep our children safe. It is imperative that we teach them the modicum of being the same person that they are in person, maybe online. And if they have a desire to do it otherwise, maybe ask them about the process of doing it otherwise, and why would you do it otherwise, and what would the purpose be of putting something out there that maybe isn't really you. Because everybody loves Halloween, and getting dressed up on Halloween is awesome, and it's a candy holiday, so everybody knows I love candy holidays. But it's not necessarily a once a year celebration. It's not a once a year holiday. You're talking about your everyday life, your real information that's at stake, the information of your family, your loved ones, those you care about, all of those types of things. So I'm going to show you a couple things here. I'm going to get out of this Facebook, or not Facebook, this PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you some of the stuff that I found just in the news in the last day or so. Okay, this is a story of a young man who was catfished on the internet. And catfishing, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but those that aren't, I'm gonna let you know. He was an all-American type of teen out of Mississippi, right? He was a 16-year-old. He had his driver's license, went hunting with his dad, came home, worked out, had dinner, prayed with his mom, went to bed, got online, and someone contacted him and wanted him to, wanted him to have a sexual encounter with him. So, he says, great. He starts, the female or proposed female, the person that was on the other end says, that's great. I just taped this. If you don't pay me $1,000 right now, I'm going to send this to all your family and friends. And, he pled with the person, no, please don't do this. And they said, well, pretty much your life is over if you don't come up with $1,000. So up to you. But, he tried for 2 hours to get him to do it, didn't do it. Figured his life was over, and unfortunately he took his own life, because it's the middle of the night. He's had a full day. He's done everything that makes all of us tired. And, he doesn't want to be perceived, having worked as hard as he has, for all of the things that he's done right. And he has a lapse in judgment, a momentary lapse of reason. And all of a sudden, people are going to see him as this depraved person who is, doing these things that he didn't really, foresee himself doing. Good looking guy, all-American guy, right? Just doing the all-American thing. And before you know it, it's over. Okay, that's very, very sad. Couple more, and then we can do some questions. Okay. So then we go back and we look and we see, this one was fascinating. This one was about Cosmopolitan magazine. I can't stop cyber stalking people from my past. So this is, a mental health advice, a therapist, advice columnist who's telling people, yeah, I totally get that. It's natural to be interested in people, that you used to know, so on and so forth. And, I find it fascinating when we talk about it that, this is somebody trying to rationalize the idea that, there's something that we need in our lives that we can't fulfill in another way, relationship wise. So, being able to look at or see or track the progress of people that we don't know anymore. Okay. Again, looking at, let's see. I thought these were all still, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so this one was interesting to me because this young man committed suicide when he was 15. He was devastated by the fact that people had been bad to him. For quite some time in school. He and his mother had gone to school administration. They talk about the story, and they go through and they do these types of things, and they talk about how the older brother, found this young man hanging in his basement, and he was, he was devastated, obviously. And then this last part was the part that got me about this. A year after Kirchner's death, his abuse continued. One student defendant posted a yearbook photo of Kirchner on the anniversary of his suicide. So this kid's been dead a year, with a rope placed across his neck and a caption reading, "Can't believe 1 year, rope still ain't break," but I think it meant still didn't break, with a flexing bicep emoji and a smiley face with sunglasses. That's just unbelievably cruel to me. I cannot even believe that stuff like that goes on. To me, it makes me tearful just to think about it. That's just unreally cruel. And then this one out of a Florida university, again, this is the last one, and then we'll start with some questions, okay? But this young lady had disabilities, learning disabilities of all sorts, okay? Oh, before we go on to her, this last one that I told you about, the young man that was LGBTQ or he was gay, he also had a form of autism. So he was being teased both for his autism and for the fact that he had come out in middle school as being gay. So moving on to this young lady, she would run as part of the track team and maybe wasn't the best person on the track team, but her coach was so unbelievably cruel to her, not only in person, but, you know, over the internet. It just boggled my mind. And then, you know, the coach was said to take special satisfaction in humiliating her, often fat shaming her while referring to her as retarded. To me, there is just no excuse for this type of blatant criticism and ridicule. It's just, it defies human gratitude and human respect, all of those types of things, okay? So anyway, he ends up, you know, cutting her from the team without her knowing. And two months later, she's dead. She takes her own life. You know, I mean, it's abhorrent to me. Anyway, I'm going to end there. And if you guys want to send in any questions, those kind of things, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time and for supporting the AAC. I hope this has been beneficial to you. The slides, as well as the recording of this presentation, will be available, I'm sure, in the next week. Our former executive secretary, Savon Alvarez, you know, does a tremendous job with this, and she's agreed to do this for us as well. So thanks to everyone, and just type your messages and we will take them as they come. Okay. So yes, for everybody, the slides will be available. And if you use your email to sign up, you'll be sent a copy of the slides. Unfortunately, it will not come with the news stories that I showed you, but they are from yesterday and today. So, you know, if you have an Apple phone, get on Apple News and you'll come across these same stories. You know, let me know if there are any questions and those kind of things. I will wait to see them in the webinar chat. Just write them down, and I will respond verbally to those questions. Thanks, everybody. Okay, here we go. What recommendations do you have for parents of teenagers watching inappropriate content at home? I think my number one, this is from Christopher Tung. I think my number one recommendation is to immediately install some type of tracking program on their devices. And if they give you any kind of grief for that, say to them, look, you know, this is in lieu of me taking your device. And if you remove the tracking program, the next step is to take your device. And I don't want to do that. So, and believe me, there are a lot of kids out there that are savvy enough, tech savvy enough that they can get around that. So I would say at that point, you know, I deal with individuals in the legal system all the time that have internet types of offenses that are facing them. And I actually employ one of the top systems managers for a Fortune 500 company when an individual is out on bond or out on bail, to lock them down, because we simply can't afford, when providing defense for these individuals, to have them get on the internet or be found by law enforcement on the internet. And that just won't work. This is from LaWanda Mayberry Dalton. Do you know of an influencer or a YouTube type resource that shares this in a kid-friendly format? Absolutely, 100%. In fact, 2 of those 3 resources that I gave you, most of their stuff is done in a format that I would consider interesting to kids, fast moving, some song, that kind of thing. But I think definitely getting teenagers and young adults to view this kind of stuff and to know the numbers and to know that type of stuff is incredibly important. And I know that there are a lot of people that are online, both with autism spectrum disorders and otherwise, promoting the neurodivergent or not everybody is like everybody else type of a scenario in a way that I think teenagers and young adults will be riveted by, because I'm absolutely blown away by the stuff that I've seen for people trying to be open to and accepting of all other types of people. I think, while we've reported some of the stuff that is startling to us, I think needs to come out, I think it should also be made known that, there's a lot of really good stuff looking to counteract that or looking to push back on that. From Christina Fishback, what is the best way to convince your child or 3 daughters? Well, for me, I have 2 daughters at home, but I also have married daughters, okay? And I think the best way for me to do that, because one of my married daughters already has a couple of girls, and I think one of the best ways to do that is to tell them and to show them that, our relationships with people are the most precious thing we have in this world. And if you choose to devote your time, your attention, your energy to things and people that are not part of those people that you love and care about, you're dividing your time, or you're dividing your building of your relationships with whomever you choose to share it. So if you're doing it online, if you're doing it away from home, those kind of things, those are choices that you're making. What you want to show them is the formula for anything that's worthwhile has a cost and a benefit associated. If you spend time building something like a relationship with someone that you love and care about, that amount of time will pay dividends as they love and care about you. If you take from that and give pieces of that to another source, then that diminishes your capacity for that relationship. It's not that you have to do everything with the people that you love and care about, but those people should be the priority. Those people should be the first in your world. Okay. Thank you, Christina. Meredith Sinclair. Meredith, good to hear you, see you. How can parents start setting boundaries and limits with adult children who are who are resistant to decreasing their time? Well, I think the first thing is, Meredith, I think you have to talk to your adult children about balance. I think you have to talk to them about what their goals are, which your company, lifestyle behavior consulting is phenomenal at. You have to say, okay, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? Who do you want to be? And then you look at the things, the objectives that are necessary to achieve those goals, and you add up the time, and then you show them, okay, this is the amount of time left for you to do what you like with. Now, if that includes exercise, if that includes sleep, and is very, very comprehensive, that's one thing. But you have to let them know that there's only a limited amount of time that they have. And if they're exceeding that time, that there are other things in their life that simply aren't getting accomplished, that need to get accomplished to meet their goals. So I think that's the best conversation to start with an adult child and say, look, if you tell me what you want, I really want to support you in getting there. And in order to do that, we have to understand what the process is or what the steps are for us to get there. And let's agree to do that. I'll support you. So if I go on a diet, let's say, and I tell people that I go on a diet, when they talk to me, they're going to say to me, hey, guess what? I know that you're on a diet. I was just wondering how that's going. Are you losing weight? If so, how much weight? Congratulations. If not, keep working at it. You're going to do it. You're going to get there. Those kind of things. Thanks, Meredith. Stacy. Okay, Stacy. You bet, Stacy. Lynn Bosworth, comment from a parent. My son is autistic. He never had a friend. Never until he was gaming. Now he has friends. I don't know what's wrong with it. How would you advise this parent? Well, what I would say to them is, okay, define a friendship for yourself. He never had a friend. Okay. If he didn't have a friend and it was because of his autism, maybe some of the things about his autism were affecting his ability to make strong relationships and friendships. So then that's absolutely okay to work on the steps to being a better friend. And you can start with your online friends, but then help him to understand that these friendships online, if the individuals are local, can grow into friendships that are face-to-face as well as online, because I'm not arguing that people can't have friends online. I'm just saying you have to know what the boundaries of those friendships are online. You have to know that there's still a need for face-to-face friendships. So if that's not happening, that's not developing, then you have to talk about boundaries and limiting time for making friends, developing friendships in person as well as online. I definitely understand the idea that, young people today make friends, talk about gaming, talk about the computer, talk about the internet. And so you need to be somewhat versed. And I think that's incredibly important. Let's see. Looks like we are about 5 minutes away. So if anyone has any last minute questions, here we go. Let's see. Here we go. Christine is back. She says, of these dangers, oh, the dangers piece. Okay. We talked a little bit about that before, but again, do not divulge personal information. If somebody's asking for information, the best way is to ask yourself the question, why do they want this information? How could they possibly use the information? And, is this something that I'm willing to put out into a space that isn't necessarily protected? Because unless you're using encrypted on both sides types of data lines, information can be taken from the internet. So you don't want to do that. Lawanda, okay. I know several teens that have more online friends than in-person friends. Do you know of any structured online groups that might have face-to-face interactions sometimes also? Yeah, absolutely. Meredith Sinclair's group, Life Behavior Consulting, does online stuff, and there are other places around the community that do the in-person activities as well. I've done some in the past. Sometimes, depending on the availability in my schedule, it's super enjoyable to be with a bunch of kids from the youngest I do it with typically at this point is 12 to, and I have young adults. So I have kids, young adults that come to groups that are in their early 30s. But the idea is learning to be with other people, learning to understand the role you're playing and those types of things. And I think that if you get any type of exposure to in-person and you're doing online, it can only enhance that online type of an experience. Okay. So, okay, everybody, we are under 5 minutes. And again, I just want to appreciate everybody for taking the time to come and listen. I mean, I know it's hard to get 90 minutes together when you've been out all day doing, daily stuff. But this stuff is super important, and it's a part of the world that we live in, and it's incredibly rich, allowing us to view different areas, different parts of the world. But it's also very, very unsecure at times. And so I don't want people to take this as the sky is falling or Chicken Little, but what I do want people to recognize is that when we let people into our lives online, there are costs and benefits associated. Some of those are incredibly enriching. Others of those are incredibly hurtful. Okay. So I hope that everybody has taken that from this account. I hope that everybody understands and knows how much human interaction enriches our lives. And last of all, but not least, I hope everybody understands that every single person on this planet has a God-given right to be here. And so for any of us in any position to say, you don't get to be here, you don't get to do this, that was never a part of a world that I was born into or that I want to be a part of. So let's work incredibly hard to make sure that everybody understands respect and understands how important engaging other people are, no matter what their sameness or difference are. Again, thanks for everybody's time and attention. Have a good evening.